Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Live at 5 with the Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research. This is our first Live at 5 that's coming to you with other people in it. And today I just wanted to give you a little bit of a taste of some of the work that has started here at the Frank Lloyd Wright Smith House, restoring our historic landscape plan. Today's tour will just be an overview of some of the projects that are taking place this summer and fall at the Frank Lloyd Wright Smith House. And all of these projects are concerning our historic landscape. If you knew the house well before, you would probably be even more shocked about how different things look today than they did just 2 days ago. Fleur Detroit is packing up their little, I don't know what you call that thing, earth mover. And I'm going to step around to the other side of the house so that maybe you can hear me a little bit better. But I wanted to start by showing you the heavy equipment. It's especially dramatic to all of our neighbors who had to watch Cranbrook not be willing to violate the no landscaping rule, as all of the neighbors of Bloomfield Hills miraculously still had cut grass through the shutdown, and the Smith House began looking more and more haggard, a little bit like my own hair. So those of you who have taken a Smith House tour, and those of you who have been on enough of our digital tours know that the Frank Lloyd Wright-designed Smith House is about 1.3 miles away from the Cranbrook campus. It was built in 1950 to the designs of the greatest architect of all time, the inimitable Frank Lloyd Wright. Those are his words, but they can also be mine. And Frank Lloyd Wright designed his architecture to be organic, to be one with the site. What's interesting, if you've been to enough Frank Lloyd Wright houses, he sort of hated neighbors. He certainly hated cities. And he always told his clients to go out and buy a piece of property that no one wants. And so I think if I turn the camera around, you'll see why the Smiths were able to buy this piece of property for practically nothing. Why would anyone want to live here? In fact, if we went back in time to 1946, 47, you would have just been looking at a marsh that was completely overrun with cattails and with horse manure, because all around us were horse farms. This was one large estate, and it was apple orchards and horse farms. The Smiths were able to buy this portion of the neighborhood before the covenants were written, before the streets were even finished being laid out. They were the first people on the street, and they chose this lot because it was the cheapest. It was also the low point. All the neighbors are above us, but they thought that Frank Lloyd Wright would appreciate these enormous oak trees around the site, and that this marsh in the back would be able to sort of provide a orientation for the home. And so Frank Lloyd Wright recommended that they drain the marsh or provide an outlet so that it could turn into a pond, which they did do in 1950 using a rowboat. They made a very small pond on their property. In 1980, Mr. Smith, along with 5 of his neighbors, expanded the size of the pond, giving Cranbrook our own little isthmus out there. We own the weeping willow there, but we can't actually get to it without trespassing on our neighbor's property. And we also own the other side of the pond, which we also cannot get to except by boat. So I am accepting paddle boat donations as long as they're in the form of giant decorative plastic swans. I really think that's the way to navigate to Cranbrook's most remote stretches. Today's tour, I'm just going to talk about, now that we know a little bit more of the history, I'm just going to introduce some of the projects that we're doing. Later this summer, we're going to have a program where we're going to talk with, I'll do a presentation about the history of the whole landscape, and we'll talk with our landscape architect and review some of the plans in detail. But I thought it would be fun and a little different from our normal Live at Fives to talk about what is happening as it's happening. And so when we think about restoring the Smith House landscape, we studied first the plans of Frank Lloyd Wright. His designs for the house did not include any notations as far as plants, but if you notice around the garage, there are planter boxes, and you'll also see how he ties the house in to the landscape. The house is lower here. This brick line is actually above the blue couch on the inside, so the whole house is sort of inextricably linked to the site. And then see how he brings walls out into the landscape. So he's very much thinking of the house and the landscape as one thing. In 1957, Thomas Church, the noted California architect who built the influential sort of suburban guidebook Gardens Are for People, and was one of the fathers of modern design and landscape architecture. Thomas Church came to Bloomfield Hills, he visited the Smiths, and he designed on onion skin paper a new plan for the landscape. And that was initially sort of what we thought, let's restore it back to Thomas Church. 1957, he's a famous landscape architect. Mr. Smith was very proud of his plans. That's what we should do. But the more we studied photographs, the more we realized that actually going back to the Church plans was no longer possible. Remember, that was 57. The lake is 1980. In 1968, they built an addition onto the house, as well as Mr. Smith was an active gardener, particularly after his retirement from Cody High School in 1977. He was always tinkering with the landscape. None of the sculptures were here when Thomas Church was here, and the trees were much smaller when he proposed planting them, and Mr. Smith kept changing. And so we're restoring the landscape to a sort of Melvin Maxwell Smith, Thomas Church, and Frank Lloyd Wright collaboration. And so we're studying the three men's ideas in the same way that they studied each other. Thomas Church responded to what he saw was Frank Lloyd Wright's landscape, and then Mr. Smith continued to work in the manner of Thomas Church. Actually, Smith asked Church, will you design a larger lake? The neighbors are going to help me expand it. And Mr. Church had, I think, already passed away, and it was his widow, perhaps. Someone tells him, you know, Smithy, you learn the principles. You know exactly what you need to do for your house. Have confidence in yourself and design it yourself. And so we're going back to that plan that sort of looks at these three influential figures of the house's landscape. And today for our Live at 5, I just want to talk about the problem of the driveway. Remember, we're the first people on the block, and so the street is still not paved. The driveway isn't paved. Some of the neighbors now have paved driveways. And we thought about, it would save us a lot of grief in the winter if we had a paved driveway. It would help stop bringing rocks into the house if we had a paved driveway. But Frank Lloyd Wright actually loved pea gravel. Frank Lloyd Wright, if you know much about his architecture, in his early houses in the 1880s, he was building front porches where you could sit and wave at the carriages going by. But by the 1900s, think of the 1908 Roby House, he takes the porch and he internalizes it because he realizes that you are never going to sit on your porch and talk to someone in a car. And so he begins to build his architecture in relation to the auto. And so you see Frank Lloyd Wright being one of the first people to incorporate carports in his house. And he begins to think about how the car arrives and how that affects your understanding of the architecture. And so he preferred pea gravel because he thought that when you turned onto the pea gravel and you heard the noise beneath your tires, you began to get a sort of aural sense of approach to the house. And so even walking across it, maybe you can hear my feet over all the trucks, it has this very distinct sound that was quite important to Frank Lloyd Wright. So we will keep the pea gravel, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're going to do to stabilize it towards the house in a moment. But I wanted to step back and show you this edge here on the right. You'll see this plate steel, which has been revealed by pulling away the gravel. And this is original to 1950. Unfortunately, the other side steel plates have been ripped out by snowplows over the years. But if you look down at the steel edge, you'll see this gentle curve, this very loose radius. And then on the other side, you can actually see the wider curve coming. And so it is a radius from Frank Lloyd Wright's design of the mailbox, and then it turns around and provides this large, very large semicircle towards the house. We'll restore the hard edge on this side, and then the gravel will be contained. You can also see on the right-hand side the dirt, where we have, working with Fleur Detroit of Bloomfield Hills, restored the curve of the driveway. And so this hill had eroded, and much of the dirt had washed into the driveway, which was both raising the height, and then also plants were growing out of the driveway. And so Fleur Detroit has excavated all of this gravel. Here is our previous driveway here. And all of that was removed from the driveway, and then used new dirt to help impact and rebuild the edge. Soon they will start rebuilding this edge, because the driveway was actually originally cut into the hill. And I think once it's all done, it will actually enhance the feeling that the house is buried and sort of one with the landscape. We have also, in removing about 4 inches of pea gravel, revealed the original planter boxes. So you can actually see what had happened over time. The pea gravel had just been snow plowed, and then in the summer or spring, it would be sort of spread back out, and it created just an enormous backlog of pea gravel where you could no longer even see that the planters were really distinct from the gravel. They looked more like sort of a brick border inset in the gravel. If you look at early photos of the house from 1950 and 51, the foundation actually goes down another 8 inches. And so this was like a step into the house. But in that same series of photos, the yard is just mud. So we know that it wasn't intentionally left that way, even though I think it kind of looked more striking to have this real step into the house. We're taking it back to what it looked like from sort of 1952 all the way through the 1980s, where the planters and the driveway are separated. Inside the carport, which if you've taken one of our tours, you know this is where you kick off your shoes and put on the protective slippers. Here we will be adding a polymer-based binding agent. We're experimenting with 3 different types of binders. If anyone has any experience with them, we're happy to know what you think. But working with our landscape architect, Quinn Evans of Ann Arbor, and Gregory DeVries, who was with Quinn Evans and helped design our project, as well as the experts Joe Nicarata and his team at Fleur Detroit, we're going to experiment with different binding agents. And so the pea gravel will transition from loose gravel where I'm standing, and then it will become visually the exact same, but it will transition into a bound gravel that will no longer track pebbles into the house, and will allow people to walk across in our little house museum slippers. We'll put mats down and they'll walk on the slippers into the house. So that's what's up now. It was fun. If you saw the story earlier, you can go back and watch it. It was exciting as Leslie Mayo, the registrar, and I cleaned out these closets here, watching the excavator as he slowly but surely peeled back the gravel, added it to the pile here, and then you can see we've gotten down to the impacted level of the gravel and how he has slowly brought it down and then back up. And so they had a laser level set up on that side of the property, and then they had a sort of stick that was reading the laser level, and so they would hold the stick out, catch the laser, and then say, oh, we need another half an inch here, another half inch here. And so now, those of you worried like me about drainage, you can just tell that the house will shed water this way to an underground drain. The driveway is actually all now sloping in this direction, so the rainwater will come from the neighbors and then out into the yard there. And the water that pools here will seep through the cast pebbles and then through the French drain out into the backyard. Hopefully it will solve all of our issues of a soggy carport and also be easier to plow and maintain in the winter. And we are excited that we are partnering with Fluor Detroit on this project. I almost revealed it too soon a few tours ago before the dotted I's of our contract, but Fluor Detroit has been so far a really amazing contractor, so attentive to detail and so concerned with the getting this project right. And it is a pretty special project and a pretty exciting journey to embark on. And beyond being the research that we did in Cranbrook Archives and the Smith family papers, we are indebted to all of the research that Quinn Evans and Greg DeVries did as far as identifying species in tiny old Polaroids using loops and scanning the images and zooming in to try and figure out what species of crabapple, what species of wisteria. Interestingly, in liberating some of the invasive plants, we have found remnants of the original plantings, and so we're able to confirm or deny species. So far, Quinn Evans has been 100% right, and we're going to propagate and maintain the original species where we can. And then, how is all of this being done? We are forever grateful for Anne Smith Towbes for her generosity, both of donating the house along with the Towbes Foundation, but also in providing the resources to allow Cranbrook to bring the house back to its sort of glory of what Mr. Smith created. Time and architecture are always at odds, but time and landscape architecture are at a much sort of swifter battle. And so after Mr. Smith's passing in 1984, the house lost that sort of tender, personal, everyday care. And I think that with Fluor Detroit at the helm of the project and with Anne Smith Towbes supporting it, we're going to be able to bring the landscape back to something that Mr. Smith would recognize and be very proud of, and will coordinate quite beautifully and harmoniously as Frank Lloyd Wright intended it with the inside of the house. So the inside has been freshened up, new upholstery, new curatorial choices back into the 1980s, 70s, and the landscape will now match. Thanks for watching this live at 5. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, we are going to be doing more presentations and programming about the Frank Lloyd Wright Smith House landscape and the Frank Lloyd Wright Smith House landscape restoration plans. So look for those coming up. If you're not subscribed to the Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research Landscape, or Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research email list, make sure that you go to center.cranbrook.edu and sign up so you get our Wednesday e-blast that will inform you of all the events coming up at the center, including any landscape programming that we have. These Live at 5s are every Tuesday and Thursday here on Instagram Live, and then they are on Wednesdays on Facebook Live. Now, today is not a tour of the inside of the house. Scroll back in your phone and you'll find the inside tour, but I have somewhere left my photograph that I wanted to end the tour with. So let me find that photograph. The house is boarded up for the winter. And I want to leave you with a picture of the house that we pulled this morning as we were contemplating what the driveway shape was. We weren't expecting to find that the steel edge on the right-hand side of the driveway, so we dug down because that was 4 inches deep in gravel. We kept digging to try and find it on the right-hand side, but we never found it. And so Leslie and I had to go to archives, and thank goodness to our former senior May student, our intern, Elizabeth Fairman, who diligently scanned 800 photos. And so all of the Smith family paper photograph records are digitized. And so we went back to try and find what did the driveway look like. And so I'll leave you with this photograph of the house around 1951. And this is viewed from the neighbor's horse farm. And do you see how beautiful the driveway is? And I will sort of, before our public program, do more research, but I would attribute the shape of this driveway to Frank Lloyd Wright, especially seeing it here with the relationship from the linear mailbox to this perfect semicircle into the sort of parking area, and then this beautiful gentle curve on the right-hand side. Thanks so much for joining me for this Live at 5. I'm Kevin Adkisson, the curator for the Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research, and I will see you next Tuesday for another Live at 5. Have a great weekend, everyone. Be safe, wear your mask, and I'll see you next Tuesday.